Hello and welcome to The Nation. I'm ELANE NOOR Abdullah. And today we ask, what did the ASEAN officials meeting in Kuala Lumpur really deliver? Were there meaningful outcomes, or was it just more diplomatic niceties? Now, in the studio with us is Dr. Chee Meng Tan, Assistant Professor of Business Economics at the University of Nottingham, Malaysia. And shortly we'll be joined virtually by AZMI HASSAN as well, Fellow at the National Council of Professors, to share his insights. But let's start here in the studio with Dr. Chee Meng Tan. Chee Meng, how are you doing today?
Doing good, thank you.
Fantastic. Lovely to have you in the studio. Now let's talk about what's been sort of keeping the city abuzz in the last week or so. You know, we've had like road closures, roadblocks. People have been like complaining about that. But what caused that was essentially the ASEAN senior officials meetings that was being held in Kuala Lumpur in the last couple of weeks. And let's talk about the regional unity. And this is under pressure because we're in geopolitical climate that's a little bit volatile at this point of time. This is ASEAN senior officials meeting and East Asia Summit. It happened concurrently, came during rising geopolitical and economic uncertainty. The usual pledges were made, as usual. Commitment to ASEAN centrality, peaceful dispute resolution, and rules-based order. But did the discussions in Kuala Lumpur reflect any real movement, or was this another exercise in diplomatic optics? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, a lot of the discussions probably happened behind the scenes anyway. So whatever is actually going on during the East Asian Summit or during the foreign ministers' summits or meetings are actually sort of diplomatic niceties, I would actually say. Of course, there's a lot of geopolitical issues that's going on, whether it's the South China Sea or whether you're talking about the US tariffs and so on. I mean, for the most part, ASEAN has been quite, they have talked about these things, but they didn't want to antagonize, I think, forces by naming them directly. And I think, given the geopolitical climate, it's probably the wisest thing to actually do, because owing to Donald Trump's quote-unquote volatility when it comes to the US tariffs, it's actually probably better to err on the side of caution when you're talking about these things. And the same thing happens also for the South China Sea. So there are definitely a lot of discussions going on, but I think maybe the focus would eventually shift to other things and not just geopolitical issues.
Now, it always seems like people are tiptoeing all around each other with regards to this. And I mean, I think we are lay people who always like to have, you know, things being transparent, things be a little bit clear and upfront. But, you know, diplomatic relations are not that easy for us to be able to tread. Now, the world is watching how ASEAN responds to this unpredictable Trump-led US administration, and it's caused a lot of chaos throughout the first half of the year. While President Trump is threatening sweeping tariffs, we have maybe about 3 more weeks before ours come into full force on the 1st of August. His Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, struck a softer note and a softer tone as well, hitting at room for negotiation. And we've been at the negotiating table for quite some time as well. How do you read this good cop, sort of bad cop kind of like dynamic? And can ASEAN really afford to keep playing it safe with a partner as volatile as the United States?
I think the answer would be ASEAN has to still play ball with the United States, because if you're looking at some of the countries like Vietnam, Malaysia, Thailand, and so on, we do export a great deal to the US. So as far as we're concerned, the US is a very large market that we would like to still tap into. So we definitely need engagement. We can't just say we're decoupling from the US and depending on China and stuff like that. For the most part, the good cop, bad cop dynamics is something that Trump probably uses quite a bit as a negotiation technique, because he's trying to squeeze concessions as much as possible from countries that's actually negotiating with. So you have, you know, Trump coming in being really tough and pushing, you know, the envelope, and then you have Marco Rubio striking a more nurturing, caring note. So obviously, when you want to talk, you'll talk to Marco Rubio, and Rubio's like, you know, I'll talk to my president. Eventually, we'll try to get it down, but I can't guarantee it unless you give us certain things. And this is probably what they're getting at right now. It's basically part of Trump's transactional mindset and actually maximizing gains from partnering countries.
Yeah, it's very obvious because it's all very transactional. It's what will I get? What are the concessions? What are you willing to give in order for us to, you know, that's that push and pull that's happening. And amid this unpredictability as well, some analysts suggest Southeast Asian states may increasingly turn to China, not because they share values, but because they seek stability. Did the KL meetings reveal any shifts, even subtle, in ASEAN's center of gravity toward Beijing? Beijing? Your thoughts?
I don't think so. At the very forefront, we talk about neutrality, we talk about centrality. And centrality, like what our Prime Minister said, is not about pushing others outside. I mean, it's about focusing on what we can actually to integrate our economies, to become better in what we actually do. But I don't think the KL meetings have said things that would actually shift the dynamics in favor of China. And it probably wouldn't be the best thing to do also when Marco Rubio was actually here. So no, I don't think that was the case.
Right, okay. And there was also a renewed mention of SHAFIKA, the Southeast Asian Nuclear Weapon-Free Zone. This is a 1995 agreement where ASEAN members committed to keeping the region free of nuclear weapons. Now, but in an era of strategic alliances and military buildup, does SHAFIKA still matter? Or had it become more symbolic than real?
I think given the geopolitical tensions and volatility that's actually going on, there was even rumors that Japan might actually be interested in nuclearizing. And my take on it is they won't. And I would say that even in Southeast Asia, we won't be doing that either. In part because if we were to do that, they would destabilize the dynamics in the region. And that would actually cause a lot of alarm angst amongst the two superpowers as well, which is China and the US. So I think it's still relevant, partly because we don't want ASEAN countries who are powerful or wealthy enough to feel that their security is at risk, and the only way they could actually secure that is by arming themselves in a nuclear arms race. And I think this is the reason why this particular act or this particular provision is still important, because we do want neutrality, and having nuclear arms is definitely not neutral, I think, in many ways.
No, I agree. I think it's really prudent that we stay neutral, and going in an arms race is not going to gain anybody any grounds or strides in creating already a geopolitical destabilized sort of environment. What we need is for us to be able to work with each other. Now, the August 1st deadline looms over the region. This US tariffs threatening to shake Southeast Asian economies. Do you believe ASEAN is prepared to act with one voice if Washington follows through? Or are we looking at a region still negotiating separately out of fear and urgency?
I think the question is, would Washington actually allow a bloc to negotiate with itself? And the answer is no, because Trump is very fond of bilateral trade and bilateral negotiations. And the reason is very simple. When you have a whole bloc that you have to negotiate with, there's going to be a lot of consensus that must be made, time delays, and so on. And that's not necessarily what someone as transactional as Trump would actually want. So he would still want to go in the direction of bilateral negotiations. And for the most part, if you look at ASEAN in itself, we are one bloc, but we're not a political union the way we see it as in the European Union. We're not the European Union. We're not a political union. So we have our interests at hand, and we will actually negotiate based on that. I think that's one of the issues, because we haven't really fully integrated in many ways. Until that actually happens, we are unlikely, I think, to negotiate as a bloc.
No, and I think it makes sense because everyone has different stakes, have different interests and different agenda. And I think the bloc has its sort of like advantages, but individually in terms of the trade negotiations, it will still be done individually, as you mentioned. But we'll take a short breather right now. When we come back, we're speaking to AZMI HASSAN, Fellow at the National Council of Professors. And stay tuned, we'll be right back. Welcome back to The Nation. You're still with me, ELANE, NOOR, Abdullah, and we're speaking about the ASEAN senior officials meeting that happened in last week in Kuala Lumpur. And on the line with me is AZMI HASSAN, Fellow at the National Council of Professors. AZMI, thanks for joining us on the line. We've just heard how Trump's tariff policy is casting a long shadow over Southeast Asia, with countries unsure how harshly they'll be hit. Is ASEAN equipped structurally and politically to respond as a bloc if Trump follows through, or are we simply too fragmented to push back? AZMI, may we have your thoughts on this?
Yes, Eileen, I think this time around, Trump will follow through. I guess 25% put on Malaysia, and I think 36% on Indonesia. I think we are not fragmented organization. Chairman of Malaysia, in this case, has proposed we don't retaliate with Trump, but open up the door for negotiation. And Vietnam shows that they got 20%, but Vietnam, I think, too much has been given to the United States, open up the market. I don't think Malaysia will do that. Other nations in ASEAN will do this. And in that mentor, I think the chair of ASEAN, we should with
Sorry, I think we're having technicalities with AZMI. Chee Meng, maybe you can share your thoughts on this same question as well. We were speaking about whether the bloc, if Trump follows through, are going to be too fragmented to push back. Will be pushing back?
No, owing to the neutrality of the ASEAN region, I think it's very unlikely that we will push back. And pushing back basically means that Trump will push back harder.
Oh, yes.
So we don't want that to happen. We've seen this happen to China when the tariffs were actually imposed. Everything started escalating until 145% U.S. tariffs on China and 125% Chinese tariffs on the U.S. So we don't want that situation to escalate where the Malaysian tariffs, which are supposedly 25% come August 1st, will turn out to be 125%. We don't want that. So, and I think Malaysia and ASEAN is very careful to not antagonize Washington in that regard. So they're tiptoeing on eggshells and we're being very careful. But can we actually push back? I don't think we should, even if we could. So probably not, no.
And I think that was a really great example of how if you went head to head with it, and it became a little bit of a comedy at that point of time. It just became ridiculous. We were like looking at this like 100 and whatever percent. Does that even make sense? Yeah. It was like literally, I don't know, a showdown between two powerhouses, and the rest of the world watched on there. And in studio, do we have AZMI back on the line? Oh, fantastic. Now, AZMI, we have the next question for you. Sean Fess, the idea of a nuclear weapon-free Southeast Asia was reaffirmed again in KL, but with the rise of AUKUS, US military presence, and China's assertiveness, some see it as outdated. In your view, is Sean Fess still a relevant framework, or is it being ignored in the realities of regional security competition, AZMI?
And the members, the new weapon of the weapon for nuclear or nuclear weapons. And for the last few weeks, saying as that this particular treaty is here too. I think it's very good. In Russia a few weeks ago.
AZMI? Sorry, AZMI, we're losing you as well. We're still having technical difficulties on the phone with you. Thank you so much for trying to join onto our call. It looks like it's just you and I, Chee Meng, throughout this session. But I think we spoke about Sean Fess earlier with regards to maintaining a neutral stance, centrality. I think as Asians, we are very focused on the prosperity and sort of like working together in harmony. And I think the question to AZMI was, is it being ignored in the realities of regional security competition? I'm not sure whether you have any thoughts on that.
I mean, we definitely have to stay neutral. I mean, again, we don't want to have a situation where we escalate regional tensions even further. We already have that here. We are talking about great power competition between the US and China. And eventually, if some of us, like, I don't know, any of the ASEAN countries decide to arm itself nuclearly, what does it actually entail for the ASEAN region itself? The ASEAN region members are probably going to be alarmed by that. And on top of that, the US, China, and all the other regional players will also be probably really shocked as well. So I would think that Sean Fess is still relevant in the sense that we do have to preserve the neutrality, and we want to showcase that we are here to negotiate peacefully. We are here to actually talk things over and not just, throw, balls at people. And
no, exactly. No, and I think it's really important that it was reiterated, that people were clear that we are staying neutral, that ASEAN is focused on trade, ASEAN is focused on creating, dialogue as opposed to, creating tensions, which I think the rest of the world has been focusing on. And I think we can set an example, a role model, to be able to show that we can live harmoniously. We're 600 million people strong. That's a lot of people. We may not be a billion, but we're close. Now, two persistent issues, Myanmar and South China Sea, and I think this has been in the news on and off frequently, remain unresolved, and ASEAN continues to lean on non-interference. That's always been sort of our stance. Is that principle still defensible, or is it now the bloc's biggest obstacle to credibility and relevance?
I think the Myanmar issue is a stumbling block, but it has always been a stumbling block in many ways. I mean, it's a poor country. It has a lot of internal issues. So one way of actually bringing it up is to basically raise it economically. And I think there needs to be peace. And that's why there's the 5-point consensus that we actually have to actually deal with the issue. I mean, the way I would see it, one of the biggest stumbling blocks is not just Myanmar. It may be a credibility issue on how we could actually resolve issues within member states. But I think what we should actually be thinking about is going forward, how do we hedge against an unstable partner like Trump, and how do we integrate economically? That is probably one of the things that we really would be focusing on, or should be focusing on, because if we're able to integrate economically to some extent, then we could actually work as a bloc. But at the meantime, we're not able to. So the Myanmar issue is not the only issue. Of course, there's the South China issue, and there's the tariff negotiation issue. So it's just one of many issues that we have to deal with.
No, I mean, you touched on the Myanmar issue, the South China Sea issue. Where do we stand on that? Because we have been sort of like, I don't know what to say about it. The South China Sea issue continues to remain unresolved. It feels like there's pressure from all parties. And as the ASEAN bloc, how do we handle this better?
I think this is a very difficult issue to deal with, partly because the ASEAN has China as one of its, if not the biggest trading partner. And so how do you actually tell your biggest trading partner that you're infringing on our lands and still continue to do business with them? I think that is an issue that we have to deal with. So we have to be very real in political sense and actually ask ourselves, do we actually confront China, which is probably not the best thing, because militarily, economically, we're not on par with them anyway. Even if you were like the US, they still have to negotiate nonetheless, let alone ASEAN itself. So I think we need to have more dialogue with China and basically say, what are the main issues that we're still facing? And through economic integration, for instance, through certain frameworks like the CPTPP and all that, can we actually use that as a channel as well to sort of negotiate and sort of resolve the South China Sea in a more amicable and less vocal manner? So if you're not the only one who's confused of the matter, because we don't know what's really going on behind closed doors also, probably because these are matters of national security. Yeah, and there's borders and there's sovereignty and all of that involved. Now, we'll take another short breather. When we come back, we'll cover the way forward with ASEAN. Stay tuned, we'll be right back. Hello, thanks for staying with us on The Nation. We're still talking about ASEAN. And earlier we were speaking to AZMI Hassan, Fellow of the at the National Council of Professors. And we had a little bit of technical issues, but we have him back on the line and we'd like to hear his thoughts on SHAFIKA, the idea of nuclear weapons-free Southeast Asia. Is SHAFIKA still a relevant framework, or is it being ignored in the realities of regional security competition? We had Dr. Tan Chi Meng weigh in on that as well. AZMI, your thoughts?
Regarding the weapons-free for ASEAN, I think it works very well. The treaty works very well. For the last 2.5 decades, I guess, none of the ASEAN countries are going into the weapons using nuclear as their weapon. I think for the last few weeks, Russia and China did agree that they will adhere to this particular treaty. And when Prime Minister visited Moscow a few weeks ago, Russia did say that they will help Malaysia in terms of our nuclear program, but for the civilian purposes. So, I think this particular treaty works very, very well among the ASEAN nations. And talking about South China Sea, I think our foreign minister in this case, Dr. Omar Hassan, did reiterate that during the last few days ago during the foreign minister meeting, said that the code of conduct will be realized very soon. How soon it is, we are not sure. But again, this particular code of conduct has been discussed, ding dong with China for the last 15 years. But when the foreign minister said it will be finalized very soon in the near future, I think this is good for the South China Sea. This is good for ASEAN. The problem with ASEAN is that they are sometimes a nation, they are more inclined to support China, another nation inclined to support the United States. I think that's the problem with the South China Sea issue and also the Myanmar issue. So I'm hoping that the sound is okay because I'm driving right now, Elaine.
Yes, perfect, Azmi. We can hear you loud and clear now. Thank you for your thoughts and weighing in on the South China issue and South China Sea issue, and that the COC will be sort of resolved or finalized, and we'll be able to see that shortly. Thank you so much, Azmi. Now, we'll move on to the next time. We were talking about the way forward for ASEAN, Chee Meng. Over the years, we've heard repeated calls for economic integration, and you've mentioned that earlier in the previous segment as well. A digital economy push, and I think we've done quite well in pushing towards that digital economy and green transition as well. We're seeing strides in that as well. I see it on a daily basis. This year was no different. Were there any signs in Kuala Lumpur that these ideas are being translated into coordinated action, or are we still stuck in the rhetoric stage?
I think part of the issue is the ASEAN region is not like it's not a political union in the sense of the European Union. We have many non-legally binding provisions. And so DEFA, for instance, which deals with the digital economic framework within ASEAN, is legally binding. So we're actually interested in digitizing the economy. We're actually trying to do trade in that regard. And that's actually very helpful in part because if you're looking at many of the countries in ASEAN, the ASEAN region, the majority of them, the economies are dominated by SMEs and micro and SMEs. And because of that, we need to figure ways of actually sort of bringing these businesses and these segments of society up. And the only way we can do that is through digitization. So I've said this before during the actual ASEAN, GCC and China meet, where, for instance, if you have like a mom and pop shop somewhere in Terengganu in the middle of nowhere, if you want to sell something, and let's say what they're doing is really keropok that's really high quality and stuff like that, liquor and stuff like that. So what do you actually do? Well, most people have no idea what they are, what they're doing. But if they're able to digitize their businesses and actually sell within the ASEAN economic framework, that would actually be very helpful. So I think we're looking at a time where SMEs are actually allowed to thrive, partly because of the frameworks that we're actually having. Of course, if you're looking at green financing, if you're looking at green tech and all that sort of stuff, Malaysia is trying to position itself as one of the green hubs within the region. And I think we're actually moving in that direction. That's definitely a correct choice.
And for the ASEAN framework, I'm actually looking forward to the easing cross-border, whether it's immigration, whether it's transactions, whether it's business, that will really allow, the whole ASEAN community to work as a community, not just, in name in itself. Now, as host, Malaysia had the chance to shape conversations, guide consensus, and lead from the center. Do you think Malaysia did enough? And can it take on a stronger diplomatic role heading into summits later this year?
I mean, the ASEAN chair is only for 1 year, and I think it's probably not realistic to expect any chair to actually push for the agenda for a very long time. There needs to be a continuation, of course. If when we're done with this, the next ASEAN chair and the next ASEAN chair, next ASEAN chair down the road would actually take on the reins of the leadership and actually push on with whether it's a KL declaration or Singapore declaration or whatever it may be they would have in the future. So I think we have done what we could given the circumstance, and we need to have continuation of some sorts when it comes to the push for policy and have legally binding provisions that actually make ASEAN countries do things whether they want to or not.
Right. Now, with the global balance shifting, this is my last question, and ASEAN's unity often questioned, the coming months are critical. What must ASEAN do differently right now to stay relevant, credible, and in control of its own future?
I mean, if you're looking at several issues, I think Nikkei Asia just recently came out an article, I read it today before coming here today. Some of the issues that ASEAN faces are internal, right? Whether it's the South China Sea or whether you're looking at Myanmar and then you're looking at the tariffs. Do we have a common response? So I think we need to tackle some of these issues piece by piece. So like what Professor AZMI was saying earlier, our foreign minister says that we will have a framework of some sort, a negotiation code of conduct for the South China Sea, and that needs to be done quickly in order for Malaysia to seem like a credible chair. That's the first thing. Probably one of the lower hanging fruits at the moment. The Myanmar issue is actually more than just, a minor issue. It's a very big thing. So that one needs to be solved. And finally, we need to look at the tariffs. Can we actually have a common response? That's a very good question.
Thank you so much for your thoughts. That was Dr. Chee Meng Tan, Assistant Professor of Business Economics at the University of Nottingham, Malaysia. And we're speaking about ASEAN. And we hope the conversation gave you, viewers, a clear view of what really came out of the recent ASEAN senior officials meetings. And that's a wrap for for this edition of The Nation. Thanks for staying with us. I'm ELANE Rablah, and follow through for more news coming right up. Bye for now. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
It's been a pleasure.